What's up, gamers? I wanted to make a quick follow-up video on the Smith of Kitava guide I posted earlier, now that I've gotten to maps and started to clear towards the end game. First off, let's just give a quick overview of the passive tree, because this is where the magic starts to happen. Now, you'll see that we have Avatar of Fire allocated. Avatar of Fire is much better in PoE 2 than it was in PoE 1, because in PoE 1, 50% of damage gets converted to fire damage, where in PoE 2, 75% of damage gets converted to fire damage. So it's a much friendlier node to allocate. And the real reason we're doing this is to take advantage of the new Fire Pen support jewel. So if you look at Fire Pen 2, you can see hits from supported skills ignore enemy fire resistance. So essentially, when we allocate this node and stack a bunch of fire damage, monsters aren't able to mitigate any of our damage. So it's a really effective combination, as long as you're still able to get enough damage scaling with the loss of 25% of the damage that you're losing because of allocating this node. And we make up for that fact by stacking in power nodes as well as fire damage. So the really cool thing about the Smith of Kitava is that the temporal weapon ability counts as empowered hits. So you can end up stacking a lot of these just 16% increased damage in power nodes, which end up giving you a lot more DPS on top of the additional fire damage nodes, LE nodes, and just generic melee damage nodes. So the tree itself gives you so much damage that you are never really struggling for DPS. Now, the one downside of this character is the end game damage scaling, end game defense scaling leaves a lot to be desired for. You see, we have 100% armor applies to LE damage thanks to these nodes, as well as some of it on gear. And for the most part, this seems to be an incredibly effective defense throughout the campaign and early maps, but I am skeptical that it is going to fall off, especially when you get to like tier 16, tier 15 maps. I haven't gotten there myself, but if you push this character that far, let me know how the defense ends up feeling, at that spot. So that's the passive tree. I want to give a quick rundown on the gem setup I've been using. So Mace Strike is kind of our main DPS, and all we're really trying to do is just stack as much damage as possible, as well as take advantage of really, really nice clear. So the Tribal Fury node, in addition to Ancestral Call, makes the AoE on your basic auto attack feel really nice. It's really reminiscent of Bone Shatter in PoE 1, where you swing your weapon and essentially all the mobs on your screen instantly explode and die. And so we're just trying to stack as much damage as possible, and given that all of our damage is elemental damage, we could take advantage of these kind of nodes, again, the Fire Pen, and then close combat. For the temporal weapon, again, this is just something that's going to scale with more elemental damage. So more elemental damage, more fire damage, and more damage. Same thing with floor jam, right? We're just trying to get damage everywhere we can. I am playing around with Ignite on this ability. One, because it has incredibly high just flat attack damage base, like 452% means you're going to do a very high damage hit, which theoretically means that your Ignite should do a decent amount of damage. But also, we have a lot of nodes on the tree that say, 30% increased damage with hits against ignited enemies. And there's other nodes like that, here, 40% increased damage with ignited enemies that we haven't got yet, but probably working our way towards that node. So you end up just getting, again, a lot more free damage when things are ignited. And igniting things seems like a decent damage modifier in itself. So playing around with kind of making this a little bit of an Ignite ability. I also trying with this combo thing. The gem setups here are very, you can do a lot with this, but the idea is pretty simple. You just get a lot of elemental damage. stack that as much as possible, get the AoE from Ancestral Call and Tribal Fury, and your build will do lots of damage and your clear will feel amazing. I want to just finish off talking about this Ancestral Cry. This feels really amazing to hit. I really enjoyed this new addition to the game. You really do feel like a complete fire god when you click this button. My only issue with it is I wish there was more defensive considerations in addition to the damage. The damage feels really nice, but you become this fire god, but you're still kind of as squishy relatively to you were before pressing this button. So just from like an aesthetic and flavor point of view, it would be really nice to have, like, I don't know, just throw in like 50% of damage, fizz damage taken as fire or something on this node when you click it. And that would make it feel like even better. But so far, I've been using this over Hammer of the Gods, and it really adds a lot of flavor to the build and makes it a lot of fun. And we're getting endurance charges, by the way, through our Bone Shatter, just to make the Ancestral Cry buff last a bit longer. Again, I wasn't too sure how important this kind of setup was with getting the endurance charges to make the Ancestral Cry last longer. You don't really need it, given the fact that we have this node allocated, which is really nice for boss fights, because you essentially just get infinite uptime of your Ancestral Cry during boss fights, which makes bossing incredibly comfortable and easy with this build. And then for spirit nodes, again, very unoptimized, but Herald of Ash just for better clear, obviously. Overwhelming Presence to get better Bone Shatter procs. And I'm just trying out Magma Barrier to get passive shield chance, get passive block chance. I'm not doing anything as far as using this to get endurance charges, but you definitely could, do it with like active block during boss fights and stuff like that. I think it's an interesting, spirit allocation. And the fact that we have 34% block with just a shield and no other block on the tree is a pretty nice level of defense. Again, not gonna rely on that to completely save our character, but throughout the course of mapping, it feels really comfortable. So finally, just real quick on gearing. Again, I just wanted to highlight this unique because I still think this unique is pretty incredible, and I don't hear really anyone talking about it. I just think the flat 15% PDR is really nice to have on an item like this when armor has struggles a lot with high damage hits. So just getting a flat PDR reduction is really nice versus those high hits when the armor value itself isn't as reliable. And the fact that this gives a bunch of flat life and chaos res too, just makes this a really good option. I definitely think at this point of the game, you probably can look to upgrade out of this. But for early, especially through the campaign, into maps, if you're playing something Kitava, I would highly recommend picking up this bad boy. And again, we're using one-handed maces. If I was playing a soft core, I would probably just go two-handed because I don't know how much you need the shield. But if you're playing hardcore, I would really recommend a shield just because the flat armor is so important, as well as the block chance just feels really nice. And again, we're just trying to stack life, armor, fire res, and a little bit of armor applies to elemental damage just so you have the 100%. Again, really basic gear. Nothing too much going on. You need to get more chaos res. That's one thing that, a little bit of issues I have with Path of Exile 2 endgame is you end up really needing a lot of chaos res, which is unfun to get on gear. And finally, last note on gearing is for damage. You just want to be stacking as much fire damage as possible. And on their weapon, it should have fire damage and percent weapon LE damage. This isn't a good weapon. They should have higher fire damage roll and more weapon elemental damage roll. It doesn't. So this weapon can be much better. I do love the always hits on the Jade Club. That's not very important, but it's definitely nice to have. And then the rest of the gear, like you definitely on rings, you want to get fire damage to attacks, and glove fire damage to attacks. That'll make your build feel much nicer on the DPS department. So that's it. That's the Smith of Kitava Avatar of Fire build. And I'll quickly just hop in a map here just to show off some of the mapping gameplay. You definitely want to be a little bit combo oriented with this kind of a character, where when you find a pack of mobs, you kind of first want to row your hammer, do a cry, pop the earthquake to make more fissures. And, things just die, right? Auto attack a mob, it dies. Got a rare mob here.
I'm not ready.
So you see it. Just really smooth.
Face me.
There is some consideration where, you know, I definitely understand that, like, you know, hitting this during map isn't the most appealing thing for a lot of people, but it is incredibly satisfying to get these huge fire damage procs when you know, hit enemies. And I do think the ascendancy is well balanced. And even though it is, you know, you're standing still hitting an anvil, you know, the build itself makes up for it in terms of doing lots of damage. So
What you're made of.
So that's it. This is the Avatar of Fire, Tempered Weapon, Smith of Kitava Warrior. If you guys are playing a similar build or you're playing this build, let me know how it feels. I'm really curious if you've been able to push farther into endgame, how it ends up feeling. I'm probably going to be re-rolling on another hardcore character. I'm thinking about pulling the trigger on a Molten Blast Blood Mage. So if you want to see me attempt to run that character back in hardcore, drop me a subscribe, leave a like. Let me know what you think of this kind of stuff, and I'll be back soon. Peace, guys.